Hello, everyone. Welcome back and thanks for joining us today. We have a brand new story to share with you, so let's get started. Lena sat across from me at the kitchen table, her posture stiff, hands clasped together like she was delivering bad news at a funeral. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her breath slow and measured, as if she were rehearsing her own tragedy. I had seen this moment play out in my mind 100 times, but I still let her think she had the upper hand. She took a deep, exaggerated breath, the kind that screamed, "This is difficult for me," before finally saying the words, "I think we should get a divorce." I expected it. Hell, I had been waiting for it. But what Lena hadn't expected, what she couldn't have prepared for, was my reaction. I smiled. Not a polite, forced smile, not even a bitter, knowing smirk. No, this was something else entirely. It was the kind of slow, deliberate smile of a man who had been holding his breath for too long and was finally allowed to exhale. It was the kind of expression you see on someone who just realized they've been walking through a storm for years without an umbrella, only to step inside and find warmth waiting for them. It was the smile of freedom. Lena blinked. Once, twice. Her confidence faltered just for a second, but long enough for me to see it. She had spent weeks, maybe months, perfecting this moment. I could almost hear her practicing in front of a mirror, testing different tones, firm but not cruel, certain but not unfeeling. She wanted to sound strong, but also like she was the victim, like she had tried, like she was forced into this decision. But my reaction, my calm, effortless indifference, that wasn't in her script. "That's it?" she asked, her voice barely masking the disbelief that was creeping into her tone. I leaned back in my chair, arms stretching over my head like I had just finished a long day at work. "Yeah, that's it." Lena's fingers twitched. Her carefully rehearsed performance was falling apart in real time, and she didn't know how to recover. She expected anger, a desperate plea, maybe even a fight. She had prepared for those outcomes. What she hadn't prepared for, what had never even crossed her mind, was that I simply wouldn't care. "You don't want to talk about it?" she pressed, her voice tighter now, as if she were trying to pull some kind of reaction out of me. I tilted my head, studying her. "Do we need to?" That's when I saw it, just for a moment. A flicker of hesitation. It was buried beneath her stubborn pride. But it was there, a tiny seed of doubt, a silent, unspoken question. Why isn't he fighting for me? Because, Lena, I already left this marriage a long time ago. I had seen all the signs. The sudden interest in her appearance when she went out, but never when she was home. The late nights at work that weren't really late nights at work. The way she smiled at her phone but barely looked at me. She thought I was blind. But I wasn't blind. I was waiting. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as she searched my face for something, anything, that would give her back the control she thought she had. But she found nothing. Because I had already won. I stood up, stretched my arms, and let out a satisfied sigh. Honestly, this is great news, Lena. I was starting to wonder how long we were going to keep pretending. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, she was the one caught off guard. Lena sat frozen across from me, her lips slightly parted, her carefully planned announcement crumbling before her eyes. I could see it, the rapid calculations running through her mind, trying to regain control of a situation she thought she had orchestrated perfectly. She had walked into this moment believing she was in charge, believing I would be blindsided. But the real truth, I had been waiting for this day longer than she could have ever imagined. She wasn't expecting indifference. She had prepared for resistance, maybe even for heartbreak. But not this, not the cool, relaxed posture I held as I leaned against the kitchen counter, casually taking a sip of my coffee, like she had just told me the weather, and definitely not the glint of amusement in my eyes. Lena finally found her voice, though it came out smaller than before. I just think this is for the best, she said. But there was hesitation now, uncertainty, doubt. I nodded slowly, savoring the moment. Yeah, I agreed, keeping my voice light. I do too. She blinked. I had stolen the ground right from under her feet, and she was scrambling to stand upright again. So, you're not upset? She asked, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I shrugged. Why would I be? That was the moment I saw it, the first real crack in her confidence. It was subtle, just a flicker of something in her expression, but it was there. She wasn't as sure of herself as she had been when she first sat down. She had spent months, maybe longer, crafting the perfect escape plan, making sure every piece was in place before she made her move. But the problem with carefully laid plans is that they assume the other person is playing the game unaware. I had known for months. I had seen the shift in her behavior. The way she suddenly started dressing nicer when she went out, putting on perfume for work, but barely bothering to change out of sweats when she was home. The way she became distant, emotionally checked out, as if I was just background noise in her life. The fake smiles, the secretive phone calls she thought I didn't notice. And the worst part? She thought she was upgrading. That's what this was. Lena wasn't just leaving me, she was trading me in for someone else, someone she thought was better, someone she thought would give her more excitement, more passion, more freedom. She thought I would be the pathetic husband left behind, begging her to stay while she basked in the thrill of moving on. Instead, I was already 5 steps ahead of her. I had removed her from our joint accounts weeks ago. I had transferred the house into my name last year when I refinanced. I had documents ready, lawyers already briefed, and every financial asset secured. She had thought she was playing chess. What she didn't realize was that I had already checkmated her before she even made her first move. And now I was watching as it slowly dawned on her that something wasn't right. So, I said, swirling the coffee in my mug, do you have a new place lined up? Lena flinched, barely, but I caught it, that fraction of a second where she panicked. Excuse me? She asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. I smiled, savoring every moment of this. Well, I assume you wouldn't ask for a divorce unless you had somewhere to go, right? You wouldn't just leave yourself without a plan. The silence stretched between us, thick with something unspoken. And in that moment, I saw it, the realization, the first flicker of fear in her eyes. She hadn't planned for this. She had assumed she would stay here, that I would be the one packing my bags, heartbroken and defeated, while she took her time deciding how to move forward. But that wasn't happening. Not this time. Not ever again. Lena stared at me, her lips slightly parted, struggling to come up with a response. The confidence she had walked in with, the quiet assurance that she held all the power, was slipping through her fingers like sand. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to adjust her approach, trying to regain control. But it was too late, because I had just flipped the script and she had no idea what to do next. She cleared her throat, forcing a small laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, I was thinking of staying here, at least until everything is finalized. You know, so we can sort through things together. Ah, there it was, the expectation. She was still convinced that I was going to play the role of the heartbroken husband, that I would let her stay in the house I paid for, that I would let her linger in my life while she made her final arrangements. I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. That's not going to work for me. Her entire body stiffened. Excuse me? I leaned back in my chair, stretching my arms with a relaxed sigh, as if we were talking about something as simple as weekend plans. "You asked for a divorce," I said, my voice calm, almost casual. "Which means you're leaving. It wouldn't make sense for you to stay here, right?" Lena's fingers curled around her coffee mug, her knuckles white. "That's not how this works, Ethan." "Actually," I said, tilting my head, "it is." A flicker of frustration crossed her face, but beneath that, beneath the anger and disbelief, I caught something else. Panic. For the first time since she sat down, she was losing. Lena set her mug down carefully, the sound of ceramic clinking against wood, unnaturally loud in the tense silence. "I don't think you understand, Ethan," she said, lowering her voice as if she was explaining something simple to a child. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I just think this is the best decision for both of us. We don't have to make this difficult." I almost laughed. Difficult? She thought this was difficult for me. She thought I was resisting, when in reality, I was simply enjoying the show. I nodded thoughtfully, pretending to consider her words. "I agree," I said smoothly. "So let's not drag it out. You should start packing." The air between us shifted instantly. Her posture tensed, her eyes darkened. "You can't just kick me out." I shrugged. "Why not?" "Because," she started, then stopped. I watched as she struggled to find the right words, trying to balance her authority with the situation she no longer controlled. I stood up, walking slowly toward the fridge. "I mean," I continued as I grabbed a bottle of water, "it's not like you don't have options." I turned to her, my smile sharpening. "You do have somewhere to go, don't you?" Lena flinched. It was small, so small that anyone else might have missed it, but I saw it, and that told me everything I needed to know. Her so-called backup plan wasn't working out the way she thought it would. Alex, the man she had been sneaking around with, the one she had risked everything for, hadn't offered her a place to stay yet. She had filed for divorce, expecting to transition seamlessly into her new life, but she hadn't accounted for one very important detail. She had never considered what would happen if I didn't fight for her. That's what she wanted. That's what she had expected. For me to beg, to plead, to argue. She wanted the emotional spectacle, the validation of knowing I still cared enough to break. But all she got was calm acceptance, and it was destroying her. I took a long sip of my water, watching her over the rim of the bottle. "Unless," I trailed off. "Unless you were planning on staying here while you figure things out." She set her jaw. "That's not unreasonable, Ethan." "It is to me," I said simply. Her lips parted as if she were about to argue, but then she stopped herself. I could see it, the moment of realization, the moment she finally understood. She wasn't leaving me behind. She was losing everything, and she had no one to blame but herself. The next few days were interesting, to say the least. Lena, still desperately clinging to the illusion of control, tried to act as if nothing had changed. She still moved around the house like she belonged there, still used the kitchen, still took her long showers, still left her things lying around as if the walls hadn't already started closing in on her. But I could see it, the cracks forming in real time. She was slipping. At first, it was subtle. The way she checked her phone more often than usual, constantly refreshing, as if waiting for a message that wasn't coming. The way she avoided eye contact when I spoke to her. The way she hesitated before sitting down at the dinner table, like she was trying to convince herself that she still had a place here. And then, the real unraveling began. It started with little fights, pointless, insignificant arguments that had no real purpose other than to make herself feel like she still had some level of control. One night, I was in the kitchen cooking myself a steak, something I never used to do when we were together. I had the radio playing softly, humming along as I flipped the meat, enjoying the rare feeling of peace. Lena stormed in, arms crossed, her face twisted into a scowl. "Oh, so now you're cooking for yourself," she snapped, voice dripping with bitterness. I didn't even look up. I simply cut into my steak, taking a slow, deliberate bite before answering. "Yeah," I said casually. I was hungry. She let out a sharp scoff. "You never used to cook when we were together." I shrugged, still completely unbothered. "Maybe I didn't feel like it back then." She sucked in a breath, nostrils flaring. "Wow, real mature, Ethan." I set my fork down, finally looking up at her. "You're the one yelling over a steak, Lena." Her fists clenched at her sides. "You're just enjoying this, aren't you?" she hissed. I tilted my head. "Enjoying what?" "This," she gestured wildly around the room. "Watching me struggle, watching me fail." For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because now she finally understood. She wasn't winning. She wasn't walking away from this with a perfect new life waiting for her. She had expected to leave me behind and move seamlessly into her next chapter, but that chapter, it was already crumbling. I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. "Is something wrong, Lena?" She glared at me, silent, her jaw tightening. That was all the confirmation I needed. Her new life wasn't working out the way she thought it would. I had assumed she would immediately move in with Alex, the man she had thrown our marriage away for. But the way she was still here, still trying to act like she had any power left in this house, it told me everything. Alex hadn't taken her in yet. Maybe he was hesitating. Maybe he was having second thoughts. Or maybe, just maybe, he had never intended to be her escape plan at all. Lena turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, her footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor. I didn't follow. I didn't need to, because she was unraveling all on her own. The next day, I decided it was time to take things a step further. While Lena was out, probably trying to salvage what was left of her plan, I started boxing up her things. Her clothes, her shoes, her endless supply of beauty products, even the stupid little decorative candles she had insisted on keeping in every room. By the time she came home, the house already looked different. She froze in the doorway, eyes darting from the neatly stacked boxes near the entrance to me, sitting comfortably on the couch with a glass of whiskey in hand. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. I smiled. "Just getting a head start." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You can't just pack up my stuff." I shrugged. "It's not your stuff anymore." She inhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. "I still live here." "Actually," I pulled out my phone, scrolling for a second before turning the screen toward her. It was a copy of our lease agreement, the lease that had my name on it, not hers. "You were never on the paperwork," I said smoothly. "You lived here because we were married. But now, legally, you're just a guest." Her face went pale. That was the moment she realized she had no options left. That was the moment she finally knew she had lost.
Lena's face drained of all color as she stared at my phone screen, her hands curling into fists at her sides. I could see the truth settling in behind her eyes. She had no leverage, no control, and no way to change what was coming next. "You're joking," she said, but her voice wavered. I took another slow sip of my whiskey, setting my glass down with an easy confidence that only made her more unsettled. Not even a little. She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head like she was trying to deny reality. That's not possible. We lived here together, Ethan. This house. This is our house." I let a smirk tug at the corner of my lips. "No, Lena. It's mine." She blinked rapidly, her lips parting as if she wanted to argue, but she had nothing to stand on. Because deep down, she knew I had always been the one handling the finances. She knew I had been the one who paid for this house, who kept it running, who made sure we never missed a bill. And now, she knew she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She swallowed hard, her bravado slipping further with every passing second. I need time. You can't just throw me out. I need time to figure things out. I exhaled through my nose, watching her like a hunter watches a wounded animal. You should have thought about that before you decided to leave me, Lena. Her eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. I could practically see the panic tightening around her chest, squeezing the air out of her lungs. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had imagined a different ending, one where I fell apart, where I begged her to reconsider, where she walked away with her head high and her pockets full. But that ending? That ending was dead. She had spent months, maybe even years, believing she had control, believing she had been outsmarting me. But now? Now she was realizing that every carefully laid brick in her escape plan had just collapsed beneath her feet. "Please, Ethan," she said, her voice softer now, a hint of desperation creeping in. I need a little time." I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Then, with a shrug, I said, "You've got 2 weeks." She sucked in a sharp breath, her eyes widening. 2 weeks? "That's generous," I replied, my tone casual, like we were discussing weekend plans instead of her impending homelessness. Lena clenched her jaw, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of dignity she had left. "Fine," she said stiffly. "I'll figure it out." I smiled, watching the last of her control slip through her fingers. "I'm sure you will." But the truth? She wouldn't. And I knew that because the next morning, I caught her in another moment of quiet desperation. I had just stepped out onto the porch to grab the morning paper when I saw her, sitting on the bottom step with her phone pressed tightly to her ear. She was speaking in hushed, frantic tones, her fingers gripping her knees like she was trying to hold herself together. I didn't need to hear the whole conversation to know what was happening. She was calling him Alex, the man she had thrown everything away for, the man she had gambled our marriage on, and from the way her voice cracked, the raw, pleading edge to her tone, I already knew he wasn't giving her the answer she wanted. I leaned casually against the porch railing, sipping my coffee as I listened to the one-sided conversation. "You said we'd figure this out," she whispered harshly, her fingers digging into her thighs. "You said, no, I just need somewhere to—" A long pause. A very long pause. Then, finally, her shoulders slumped, and she pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at the screen like it had just betrayed her. I smirked. It had. Alex wasn't going to save her. Alex wasn't going to take her in, fix her problems, or offer her a way out. Because Alex was never meant to be her future, he was just her fantasy. And now? Now she had nothing. Lena must have sensed me watching because she turned her head sharply, her red-rimmed eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, with slow precision, I lifted my coffee mug in a mock toast. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice dripping with mock concern. She didn't answer. She just stood up abruptly, brushing past me as she stormed into the house. I chuckled under my breath, savoring the moment. Because now Lena knew what I had known all along. She had nowhere left to run.
Lena was unraveling. Not the slow, subtle kind of unraveling where a person gradually comes to terms with their mistakes. No, this was the kind of unraveling that happens in real time. A complete and total collapse of everything she thought she had control over. Over the next few days, I watched as she desperately clung to the last shreds of her pride, still trying to convince herself that she had options. But it was clear. She had none. She had burned every bridge, thrown away every safety net, and now she was dangling over the edge with no one left to pull her back up. And I was just waiting for her to realize it. The breaking point came one evening. I had just gotten home from work, stepping inside to find Lena sitting on the couch, her hands gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She was mid-text, her fingers frozen over the screen, her breathing uneven. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching, waiting. She didn't acknowledge me at first, but I knew she was aware of my presence. Her body was too stiff, too tense. Then, after a long, shuddering breath, she finally spoke. "I need more time." Her voice was quiet, small, like she had already accepted she was losing the battle but was still grasping for any last hope. I raised an eyebrow. "More time for what?" Lena swallowed hard. "To figure things out." I let out a slow breath, pushing off the door frame and stepping closer. "You already had time, Lena. Months of it. While you were sneaking around, while you were making plans to leave me, you had all the time in the world to figure things out." She flinched at my words, her fingers tightening around her phone. Guilt. It was finally hitting her. "Ethan, please?" Her voice cracked, the first real crack in the wall of arrogance she had built around herself. She wasn't begging yet, but she was getting close. I let the silence stretch between us, making sure she felt it, making sure she understood exactly where we stood. Then, with the same calm detachment I had maintained from the start, I delivered the final blow. "You need to leave." Lena's head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock, then panic. "What?" I didn't repeat myself. I didn't need to. She had spent so long assuming I would be the one to suffer, that I would be the one left broken. But now she was the one sinking, and I was the one watching from dry land. Her lips trembled, her breathing coming faster now. "You can't just kick me out, Ethan. I have nowhere to go." I tilted my head, feigning thoughtfulness. "Maybe Alex has a couch you can crash on." It was a direct hit. Her entire face twisted, her throat bobbing as she struggled to hide the truth. Alex was done with her. She had thrown everything away for a man who never intended to catch her. She opened her mouth, maybe to lie, maybe to make another desperate plea, but nothing came out. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to a cold, final tone. "You have until the end of the week." Lena inhaled sharply, as if she had been physically struck. Her last lifeline was gone. She had no choice but to face reality. For the first time in our entire marriage, for the first time in her entire life, Lena had lost.
The house was quieter than usual. No more passive-aggressive remarks from Lena, no more dramatic sighs or forced conversations. Just silence. But it wasn't the comfortable silence of peace. No, this was the heavy, suffocating silence of someone realizing they had lost everything. Lena barely spoke to me over the next few days. She walked around like a ghost, her movements slower, her shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. She was unraveling, completely. I noticed the way she lingered near her phone, checking it constantly, waiting for a message that never came. She was waiting for Alex, and I already knew he wasn't coming. I had seen the signs days ago, the way her voice wavered during phone calls, the way her texts became more frantic. She had bet everything on him, and now she was realizing she had gambled wrong. She had traded stability for a fantasy, and now that fantasy was slipping through her fingers like water. Then, on the night before her deadline, it happened. I was sitting in the living room, comfortably stretched out on the couch with a glass of whiskey, when I heard soft footsteps approaching. Lena stood in the doorway, hesitation etched into every inch of her face. She looked different. Gone was the arrogant woman who had confidently told me she wanted a divorce. In her place was someone smaller, lost, desperate. I took another slow sip of my drink, pretending not to notice her discomfort. She cleared her throat. "Ethan," she started softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I set my glass down, raising an eyebrow. "About what?" She hesitated, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. A nervous habit. I had seen it before, back when we first started dating, back when she was scared of messing up. She exhaled shakily, then tried again. "I made a mistake." I said nothing, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wanted her to feel every second of the silence. Lena's gaze dropped to the floor, her pride crumbling right in front of me. I thought, I thought I was making the right choice, she admitted, forcing out a bitter laugh. But I wasn't. I see that now. Ah, there it was. The thing I knew would come eventually. The moment when she realized she had thrown away something real for an illusion. But what she didn't know was that her realization meant nothing to me anymore. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. What exactly do you want from me, Lena? She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting together. I don't know. I don't want to leave like this. I tilted my head. Like what? Alone? With nothing? She winced. I didn't mean for things to go this way. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, but you did. You just didn't expect to be the one suffering. Her breath hitched, and for a brief second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, pain, maybe even shame. I stood up, towering over her, my expression unreadable. You said you wanted to leave, Lena. So leave. She blinked up at me, stunned, like she never expected those words to actually come out of my mouth. But she should have. She had made her choice. And now? Now she had to live with it.
Lena left the next morning. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't beg me one last time. She just walked out, a single suitcase in hand, her once perfect posture slumped, her eyes hollow. And I let her go without a second glance. The moment the door closed behind her, a strange feeling settled over me. Not triumph, not vengeance, but peace. A kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I stood in the center of the now quiet house, taking it all in. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone. But this time, it wasn't loneliness, it was freedom. For days after she left, I expected a message, maybe an attempt to reach out, to ask for another chance, to salvage what was left, but nothing came, until a week later. It was late when my phone rang, an unknown number flashing across the screen. I hesitated, debating whether to answer. But something told me to pick up. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? Silence. Then, a familiar voice. Ethan? I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Lena. She sounded different, defeated, tired, like she had been carrying the weight of every mistake she had ever made. I said nothing, waiting for her to speak first. She took a shaky breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. I had waited for this moment once, a long time ago, before I realized that her apology didn't matter anymore. For what? I asked, my tone even. For everything. Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. For taking you for granted. For thinking I could just walk away and have everything work out. She hesitated. I lost everything, Ethan. I should have felt something, sympathy, sadness, regret. But I didn't, because Lena had dug this grave herself. She'd made her choice, and she had chosen wrong. I know I don't deserve anything from you, she continued, her words trembling. I needed you to know that I understand now. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Once upon a time, I might have let those words shake me. I might have let them drag me back into her orbit. But that version of me was gone. Okay, I said simply. She waited, probably expecting more. Some kind of closure, some kind of hope that maybe, just maybe, I still cared. But I didn't, and she knew it. A long silence stretched between us, until finally she let out a small, broken exhale. Goodbye, Ethan. The line went dead. I set the phone down and let out a slow breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Lena was gone, and with her, every single chain that had kept me tied to the past. I was free, finally, truly free.
The lesson. Actions have consequences. Lena thought she had it all figured out. She thought she could trade stability for excitement, that she could walk away from a man who gave her everything without facing the consequences. But in the end, her choices caught up with her. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about self-respect, awareness, and knowing your worth. Too often, men in relationships ignore the signs, overlook the red flags, and allow themselves to be manipulated. But Ethan? He didn't beg, he didn't chase, he prepared. And that's the real lesson here. When someone decides to walk away from you, let them. Don't fight for someone who doesn't value you. Instead, protect yourself, focus on your future, and let karma do the rest. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real-life experiences from men who have been betrayed, manipulated, and blindsided, but came out stronger, then don't forget to like this video, drop a comment below, and hit that subscribe button. Join us on Men's Cheating Story, where we expose the truth, share real experiences, and help men take back their power. Stay tuned, because Ethan's story isn't over yet. Alarm fire.